So,
All
no
right.
stupid questions.
Yeah, so I'm making my way. I'm very close to being done with the book of Genesis, which I'm excited about. And
Yeah.
one of the things, though, that I want to ask you about, because I'd never really heard a lot about this, and I don't know. Maybe this is
Oh,
something
brother.
I could picture. This is something you probably discussed with all your buddies at lunch at seminary, and got really into the weeds about. Maybe we'll see. But there's the Genesis 3:8. Do you know what I'm going to say or not yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, well, there's sort of a debate, I guess, online or maybe just in general, about the whole idea of they heard God's presence walking in the Garden of Eden. So this is after
Yeah.
they
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
sinned, they ate the apple, and now they hear. And there's a few things in this verse that I've you know found that people are debating over. One of them is that they talk about it as the cool of the day, and there's a
Hmm.
debate on whether that's actually the cool of the day, or because apparently the word that's translated also can mean storms. Now, I hear this stuff, and there's a part of me that I don't know if someone's just completely making that up or if that's true. So it's kind of hard for me to like. I don't know. So that's why I like being able to ask you, because there's
Sure.
some people who have said, "Oh, well, maybe it was in the cool of the day, but it also might have been like a really, like a storm was going, and that's one of the reasons they were hiding, and then they heard God's presence." And then uh the other kind of debate about it was whether or not that presence walking around the garden, if that was actually sort of Jesus before he became a human being. Because I don't know, there's the debate about they never saw God's face, but then yet he's walking in the garden, or his presence is walking in the garden. So I wanted to ask you about that, because that's another thing I've talked to someone recently about, this idea of sort of Jesus being present in certain parts of the Bible before he was came to earth as a actual human being. So I don't. That's a very broad sort of like go, but what's sort of your thought on
That's kind
that?
of this very broad go.
Yeah, there's
So
not like an
okay.
exact question. Just like what do you think about that?
Okay. So the word there, and I looked it up. I had to look it up because I was like, I think this is it, but I don't know. The word there is ruach, and
Okay.
ruach in Hebrew means wind, breath. It can also mean like soul or spirit, because sometimes like that's how spirits are described, as like almost like this wind or blowing. And so that's the word there. Now I guess you could hypothetically say, well, if there's enough of it, then maybe that's a storm or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's basically saying, hey, it's kind of like the breezy part of the day or the windy part of the day. And so most people would probably argue that's kind of like in essence the cool of the day, so to speak. And quite frankly, without any research whatsoever, I can tell you that more than likely your translators probably have that right.
Yeah.
I would have to look it up to be sure, but I'm pretty sure that might function as like an idiom. You know,
Yeah.
if they were to say the windy part of the day or the windy day or something like that, I'm doubtful that they're saying, oh, this is the stormy part of the day.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and that's, I mean, I don't want to jump too far into that discussion, but yeah, I do think when I'm looking at some of these people on YouTube and talking about things, I think it's different when you're getting someone who's basically speaks English and they simply look up a few words of Hebrew
mhm,
and then go, oh, well, maybe it means this instead. I mean, which is maybe they're
yeah,
right, but also if it's someone who really speaks Hebrew and English who translated it, I feel like they would have maybe a better really understanding of exactly what was being said. But
yeah.
anyway, yeah, go on.
Well,
Sorry.
and to be fair, like that's actually one of my complaints. I remember when I was a kid, when I was like in high school and stuff, and like getting an amplified Bible was all the rage. And an amplified Bible just takes certain words and it gives you other ways that it can be translated.
Ah,
And um, amplified Bibles can be helpful at times, but they can be helpful if you're like looking for the nuance of a word, but they can be very harmful if you don't understand how language works, like in terms of translation.
Hmm.
Because a lot of times, for instance, with ruach and maybe that's a good example. Maybe there's like one or two times in all of history where it's translated as storm, or it needs to be translated as storm. That still means that the bulk majority of times that it's going to be utilized to mean like wind or cool of the day, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so as a translator, it would just make more sense for you to use um the more common one rather than the more rare one.
Yeah.
um and they kind of have a principle with that too, right? Like, if the most common version of translation will work, that's the one you go with. Um and if that will not work, then you start looking for maybe some more, exceptional or rare cases.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times whenever you get to translation, you kind of get stuff like that, where, yeah, okay, I can make this say all kinds of weird things, but I'm not gonna, because that wouldn't be normal.
Yeah.
um I mean, look at it this way. It's kind of like the joke, the joke, like, you see it on a Family Guy and whatever. The founding fathers are writing the amendments and stuff in the Constitution, and the guy walks in with like two stuffed bear arms, and
Right. Yeah.
and the guy goes, I don't see how anybody could misinterpret this, you know
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
because you have the right to bear arms. Like, and the guy is walking around with like fuzzy bear arms.
Yeah.
um but it's kind of like that, like, like that's the joke. The joke is that, like, nobody would take it that way, but can you read it that way? Can somebody in 1,000 years take a look at the Constitution and go, man, these guys, they hunted bears. That's what they did.
Yeah.
They were all bear hunters, and they took their arms and carried them around. They had a right. It was in the amendments,
Yeah.
you know. And that's kind of what we're doing, is we're taking these like really rare, exceptional uses, and we're trying to fit it into something that it just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Um, that being said, yeah, I would say maybe very loosely translated, you can maybe do winds or storms, but honestly, I would just probably stick with the cool of the day. In terms of whether or not this is the pre-incarnate Jesus, honestly, I'm not going to touch that one. I'd have to do a little bit more research into that one in terms of overall thoughts. There have been some times where God appears in a human form, and a lot of people talk about how it might be the pre-incarnate Christ. I don't know if that would be this one.
Okay.
Um, you know, but then that leaves the question, like, how did, because Adam obviously walked and talked with God. um and so there is going to be some of that, like, in terms of questions, and how did he do that, and all that kind of fun stuff. But so the point of the matter is I'm not going to try to answer something that I just don't necessarily have an
Yeah.
answer to, per se.
Well.
In terms of why they hid, though, that's actually, no, that's actually part of why the eating the apple,
Right.
realizing
Yeah.
that they were naked, realizing that they had shame, all of that kind of stuff goes into play. And so, yeah, they kind of hid, but they hid, because of who God was, being righteous and holy. Remember, everything is still perfect,
Yes.
you know, even if, look at it this way, even if a storm did come, and winds were whipping and raging, remember, Adam and Eve have probably never seen anything that's destructive. They
Yeah.
don't know what destruction is, and
Yeah.
so they probably wouldn't run for their lives, because they didn't know what death was, really.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
At least not in the full capacity like you and I know. We would run because we were afraid, but they wouldn't actually understand that they are supposed to be afraid. But they understand shame. They understand that they have sinned, they have done wrong, and so
Right.
they hide themselves. You know, and you still get this too. I mean, heck, you get this with pets. You ever yell at a dog and all of a sudden they hide their face from you? Like, it's shame.
Right. Right.
Like, and humans do it a lot. We hide our face. We try to make sure nobody's looking at us, kind of thing. We're ashamed.
Yes. Yeah. That's interesting. I don't know. It's some of the, as I'm going through and trying to research more about, because I'm very new to kind of really diving really deep into it, And so one of the things I heard a person say is they were debating over, like same-sex marriage in the Bible, like biblically, like where does it if it really says whether or not that's wrong. And the person, I thought it was a really interesting response, because she responded to the person and said, I don't read the Bible to try to see what we can get away with. I try to read the Bible to see what example I need to follow. And
Yeah.
so when you brought up the Bible that had like all the extra translations, like, or added stuff, I feel
Mhm.
like when you said like sometimes that can be good and sometimes it can be bad, I'm like, I think it can be bad when people are just trying to see how far can I skew everything to like,
Yeah.
maybe it didn't really mean that. Maybe it kind of meant this, or maybe, instead of taking it for what it is, or what we kind of all accept it being. I don't know. It's just interesting.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I kind of wondered about. And I mean, I have one other question that I don't think it will take you very long. So I think we have time, because I got to the story about Joseph and
Yeah, of course.
and the Pharaoh, and he in it. Now my wording might be off a little bit, but they prepare for the famine, right? Or the
Yep.
yeah. And it was saying how he helped these people, and they dedicated, I don't know what you call it, they basically like said they owe him because he saved them.
Yeah.
um, and they essentially, don't they kind of become servants or slaves in a way, or is it servant is that the specific phrasing, or is it kind of the same thing?
So I'd have to look it up in Hebrew. My Greek is a lot better than my Hebrew. Now I will say
Okay.
this though, in the Greek, the word that we typically translate as servant is actually the word for slave. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
However, in the ancient world, they didn't necessarily make a lot of distinction in that.
Yeah.
We have such nuance when it comes to that, but that's not the way they looked at it. Anytime somebody can boss you around, you are that person's slave.
Gotcha.
And
Well.
which is why, like, they talked the Bible actually talks a lot about, for instance, like, uh owing money to a bank, because if the bank can boss you around, which it can do because you owe
Right.
it money, then you are basically a slave of the bank.
True. Yeah.
And and that's kind of the way they operate. And that's also, by the way, how they did things too. Like, you got to remember, like, our world is so fiscally driven, so money driven, that we just don't even think about stuff like that. But, like, imagine your mortgage office, like, that owns the loan on your house, wrote you an email and said, hey, we need you to take a day off work, and we need you to be at the mall at this time, and we need you to do this, and if you do, we're going to take so much off of your loan.
Right.
You'd probably do it,
Yeah.
as long
True.
as it was within reason, and the valuation was right. But in the ancient world, you didn't really even have a choice. As long as you owed them money, they were your master,
Right. Yeah.
and
Interesting.
so they got to say jump, and you got to say how high.
Right.
And
Now.
obviously some people took more advantage of that than others, but still. But
Right.
yeah.
Now, was that sort of them becoming Pharaoh's like people, or however you want to put it? Is that the same? Now, I haven't gotten to Exodus yet, so is that the same like lineage that goes into the story of Moses?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I
In fact,
was
once
assuming,
you
but
get once you get to Exodus, that's actually going to be how Exodus starts. Exodus is going to start, basically by saying, so many years passed, a Pharaoh arose who did not remember Joshua or Joseph,
oh, gotcha. Okay,
and that's kind of how it goes. Like, all of a sudden you get this Pharaoh, he doesn't remember Joseph at all. Um, and yeah, and so that's kind of, again, that's going to be kind of how it goes.
gotcha. Interesting. Okay, that's why I thought. That's all I got for this week. We'll see once I'm diving in to Exodus. We'll see what happens here.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. So, anyway, no, yeah, honestly, really good questions. I know this is always one of the problems, like looking up stuff, like getting online, and just like looking up commentaries and stuff. You really do. I think I don't know if people really realize, just how many people are out there that are going to kind of swindle them.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's what I'm trying to be weary of, because man, there's a lot of people giving a lot of opinions, and
yeah,
they like to tell you, oh, this word means this, and it also means this, and then it's like, I don't know, that like you could just be making that up. I don't know,
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
hard to, because one person said that word and then said, oh, it means cool, but it also means storms, great storms, and it's like, well, that's not what you just looked it up, and that's not exactly what it says.
yeah,
So it's like they're kind of paraphrasing what they wanted to say a little more. So
yeah, yeah. And again, those are that's also yet again another reason to that most pastors anyway, especially, should learn the languages. Now, I'm a big proponent of anybody who wants to learn the languages should learn the languages.
right.
It just adds such a depth of study. And so I always tell you, like, people, like, if they're up for it, if they're really up for it, then you should definitely take the time.
Yeah.
Um, maybe your pastor can help you, or maybe you can do it online. I mean, again, there's free stuff out there, so it's not
Yeah.
like it's really hard to get a hold of stuff.
Yeah.
So, yep, yep, yep.
Well, cool. Thank you. Yeah.